Hi there, and welcome. My name is Ben Burkby. I'm a sports psychologist from National University. Thanks for letting me pop in here during your lunch break. I'm going to be speaking with you about emotional control briefly in your high school soccer players. Now, you guys are all club and high school soccer level coaches, so you know already that soccer can be an emotional roller coaster for your players. Even in a single game, they may cycle through excitement and happiness to anger and frustration, to anxiety and fear, to guilt, and back again. And the ability to maintain emotional control in pressure-packed situations like in soccer is among the most difficult of the mental skills. And it's easy, especially in high-intensity, high-impact games, to let anxiety, frustration, fear take over. But the best soccer players know this, and they have a plan to counteract the negative emotions that might derail them during these situations. They're able to get the job done, finish the task, bring their best performance, and hopefully bring home the result. So then your ability as coaches to enhance the emotional control of your players is going to be very impactful and one of the most important things you can do. So I want to be sure to leave you today with a few great ideas for how to do that with your high school soccer players. I want you to take a quick look at these two short video clips of high school soccer players losing emotional control. So as you can see from those two examples, when players lose emotional control, it can have a negative impact on performance and the game. In that first example, which was anger and frustration, you could see that pretty clearly. And we know that in a highly competitive and physically challenging game like soccer, there's always going to be a certain amount of frustration and anger that are going to be present. And at times, it can be actually a positive thing if it propels you in the right direction. But when it's unchecked or not well managed, anger can really get in the way and hinder performance for a player and a team. It could be very disruptive, obviously, to the game. There could be players sent off with cards. There can be injuries in serious or bad examples of anger gone unchecked. And most certainly and most devastating in a typical situation is the loss of attentional focus. So when players get overcome by anger and frustration, they're not paying attention to what they need to be doing on the field, which really gives the other team better chances and really more of an advantage. Now, that second example with the penalty kick almost certainly was related to anxiety and probably to mistake management. So the player kind of made a mistake on their first attempt at the penalty, then probably lost emotional control to some degree by getting anxious in a pressure-packed situation and then turned one mistake into two, which obviously had an effect on the score of the game, and who knows what the outcome was for sure. The point is that emotional control does matter. It has an impact on performance. And I'm guessing that you have some players on your teams that may keep you up at night. So you might think by looking at this picture that emotional control is all about stuffing down your negative emotions like anger or anxiety so that you don't find yourself in a bad situation. But that's not actually what we mean by emotional control. And actually, just stuffing down your emotions and suppressing them is actually quite ineffective in a sporting context and for general well-being. Why? Well, usually by the time you need to stuff down or suppress an emotion, it's a bit too late in the chain of events. So what we want instead, and what we mean by emotional control, is that we first want players to become very aware of their emotional states, and then we want them to have the deliberate ability to either up or down regulate their emotions in a way that's effective for the context that they're in. And in your world, that is on the soccer field. How do we do that? Well, the best thing we can do is to help your players learn to interpret events that contain strong negative emotions in such a way that the impact of that event is lessened on their actual behavior, and instead what they do is more effective to the context. Quick example. Some players interpret the physiological arousal, like increased heart rate, that often happens in the lead up to a big game as a threat, something to worry about, something that's anxiety producing, and their attention and focus shifts to those sensations and they begin to worry. Other players interpret those same physiological symptoms as excitement, and it cues them to start a preparation routine that puts them in a good state of mind and gives good attentional focus to what needs to be done. I'm sure you can think of many other examples, but that's really what we mean by emotional control. So why does this matter anyway? Well, here's why. Many people, including athletes, wrongly assume that emotions are basically unchangeable and are reactions to external events over which we have little control. And we know from a lot of research that that's incorrect. Actually, with systematic mental training, athletes can learn to impact their emotional state to their advantage, much in the same way that physical training can impact their performance. So what does a successful emotional state look like anyway? What's the ideal? What are we going for here? Well, we generally want our players to be happy and to view a competition or match as an opportunity to demonstrate what they got. We want them to be calm and a little bit nervous, but to be okay with that, to be at ease with it, to accept it, but yet feel ready to begin. We want them to be excited. We want them to have that feeling of their nerves and excitement coming together in preparation for the event that's about to take place. And then we want them to feel confident. We want them to remember their past success, all their training, and have a belief that they can do well. So here are some common problems that soccer players have that relate to emotional control. Distractions. Soccer can be filled with distractions, whether it's the opposing team or the fans or even your own teammates. And of course, the bigger the match, the bigger the sideshow it can be. So players need to learn to manage distractions and prevent them from becoming a deterrent emotionally. You want players to build a reputation for being able to play well anywhere and within any condition. Change. The life of a soccer player is one of almost constant change, whether during the game or off the field. But instead of feeling alarm or threatened by change, we want players to convert change into challenges and respond positively. Fear. We want players to understand that fear is normal. It's a survival mechanism common to all people. Even the fear of failure is a good thing. Many soccer players have that. It can prevent complacency. But we want players to learn to manage fear constructively, providing them with the correct amount of energy to meet the challenge of performance. When fear gets to be too much, it's debilitating. Guilt. Okay, look, mistakes are made in soccer all the time. Oftentimes, mistakes are followed by a surge of guilt. Sometimes players overcorrect and end up turning one mistake into two because they've lost emotional control. We want players to learn to acknowledge that mistakes are going to happen, sometimes big ones, sometimes small ones, to learn to accept that mistake as it happens, let go of the guilt, and recover a positive attitude as quickly as they can. And then anger, which we've seen displayed earlier through some of those videos. Anger is normal, it's a part of arousal, it can help prepare one to compete, and it can be used effectively to be assertive and expressive in your play. On the other hand, it can also be used negatively, and we don't want players to lose control with anger. Okay, so there are many things that you as coaches can do to enhance emotional control in your soccer players. And the first one really is to be prepared and plan ahead. Many of the situations that a soccer player might lose control in can be anticipated and prepared for. And you as coaches play a key role in helping your players to understand that fact and to plan ahead and prepare for that. You know, we talked earlier about kind of the ideal state for a soccer player is kind of relaxed readiness. Players can condition themselves to learn to relax on demand. And that's a key strategy for maintaining and enhancing their emotional control. A lot of times what happens with emotional control when it goes wrong is that players are focusing on things that they have absolutely no control over, no ability to impact, and they feel helpless. We want to train players to focus on what they can do in the moment and control, and leave those other things to the side. Developing performance routines. We know that having behavioral routines that are familiar and well rehearsed for particular situations that a player might encounter are very effective in maintaining and enhancing emotional control. Self-talk. We know that what we tell ourselves makes a difference in how we feel and what we do. So we really want players to discipline themselves to only allow positive self-talk or adaptive self-talk in their games. Physical reminders and cues are great. For example, a clap of the hands, a pat on the shoulder, as a quick reminder that we've slipped into the negative, we might be losing emotional control. This is really great, by the way, for those players that we all have that are hot-headed and struggle with anger. Teammates are a key factor in this. We talked earlier about mistakes, and mistake management is a really key thing that you can do to help your players enhance their emotional control. Players should know what to do when they make a mistake. They should have a plan in place for how they are going to handle that, because it will happen. You can be key and instrumental in helping them put together a great strategy for managing their mistakes. And then just like, physical training, mental training requires practice. And so all of these things need to be rehearsed and practiced over and over again. And players need to be given feedback by yourselves or others that they work with about how they're doing when it comes to emotional control. So thanks again so much for letting me come and speak with you during your lunch break. I know this was kind of quick and fast. I'm happy to hang around afterwards if you'd like to speak with me about any of the things we talked about. And all right, well, thanks again.